Okay, real question. Why is it that sometimes an AI model sounds super confident, but then it turns out it's just making stuff up? Like you ask it a question, it gives an answer, and you say, "Tell me your source," and then it references some research paper that doesn't even exist. That is what we call a hallucination. And here's the twist. It's not random. It's baked into how these tools work. And today in this video, I'm going to explain why that happens. When we say hallucination in AI, we're not talking about some trippy visuals. No, this is when the model gives you a really realistic, authentic sounding answer. It's fluid, it's contextual, but when you dig into it, it's a whole load of nonsense. It's like if you ask a child for the answer to something and it just makes up some nonsense instead of being a bit like me when I was a child and I would just mumble, I don't know.
Do you have a question, Kelly?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
Given how much people expect AI to completely transform our ways of working, this question of what makes an AI hallucinate and how you can control it is a really big one for our era. And so it's really cool that OpenAI just released a paper on this very subject this week called Why Language Models Hallucinate. And I wanted to spend a few minutes just explaining what some of their main findings are. I'm going to do this by sharing the 6 main takeaway points from the paper. Number 1, it's about incentives, not just intelligence. Models are rewarded during training for giving an answer, even if it's wrong. Saying I don't know actually loses them points on most benchmarks, so they are encouraged to create answers where they don't have a clue. Point 2, hallucinations are not random. These are not bugs in the system, they are the system. This is how the system is working. The large language models are effectively trained to see if something is statistically likely, it's going to give it as an answer, whether that is 100% certain or not. That's how it works. It's not creating something out of nothing, it's looking for statistical chances. Point 3, accuracy does not necessarily equal reliability. Now, you might have a large language model that's crushing it. It is answering every question completely correctly. And then you expect the next answer to be as correct. That's not necessarily how it works. You can't always trust the next answer just because it's being always correct up to that point. Point 4, penalising uncertainty only makes things worse. The way these models are trained means that if they hesitate, if they are unsure of an answer, they are actually penalized as a result. That means they are encouraged to bluff. They want to help serve you and give you answers, whether or not they're sure. And that means that we encourage them to hallucinate in some way. Point 5, fixes require new incentives. Research are suggesting completely flipping the script. Let's make our LLMs more humble. Rather than encouraging them to be confident in giving definitive answers, reward them for being humble and acknowledging where they don't know the answers. In fact, you should punish them when they give definitive answers for things that turn out to be incorrect. Point 6, and this one's a curveball. Sometimes hallucinations are helpful. In times where you want a creative answer, maybe you are looking at ways of solving a problem, it is useful for a little bit of hallucination, it to be a bit more creative and to come up with ideas that might be unexpected. This isn't the case in answers to direct questions necessarily, where you want something really factual, but in ways of aiding a little bit of creativity, it can be helpful for it to be creative and hallucinate at times. And those are the 6 key takeaways from that paper. And to summarise, I wanted to give you a little analogy of a school test. I'm not sure why, by the way, I'm so obsessed with school today. It's been a few years. But anyway, at the end of most school years, you do exams. You need to summarise what you've learned that year. And that might be a 1 hour or an hour and a half paper that you sit in a room, it's deadly quiet, and you go through a number of questions. And for me, sometimes I knew the answers. I'd write the answers and fingers crossed I got it correct and I'd get some points. And others, I just had no clue. So I could either leave them blank and be guaranteed to get 0 points for those questions, Or I could guess. And that's what I normally did. I'd put a guess in there, and every now and then you'd get it correct and you'd get an extra few points. That's effectively what these large language models are doing. If they're not sure, they're guessing. They're putting something in that sounds logical. That's a reasonable stab in the dark, but it's not necessarily accurate. So the question is to us, maybe we are not putting the right exams in place to assess them in the first place, and we're encouraging that kind of behaviour, like we do at school. Here's why this matters, because it does matter. You might be thinking, who cares? It makes up some answers every now and then. Well, if AI is being used in search engines or to guide or tutor people in certain professions, or in use cases like in the medical industry to tell doctors what to do or not do in certain situations, then this could be life or death. Now that sounds extreme, but in reality, these large language models have an important job to do in telling people how confident they are in their answer. They should be humble, and they should make sure it's clear where a fact is a fact or an opinion or a potential answer is just being put out there. And if that is the case, then these have got a great place in our future. I hope that's helped you learn a little bit more about how large language models work, and more specifically, why and how they hallucinate. If you found this useful, I'd love it if you could like the video and maybe subscribe to the channel. I am trying out a bunch of AI tools, and I'm on a journey to learn about how they work and how I can use them in my day-to-day work as a product manager. If you've got similar questions, then maybe you'll find the content on my channel helpful, so you can subscribe to follow up for updates. In the meantime, let's hope over time these large language models will become even more effective. But I would love the day that I ask one of these large language models, can you give me the answer to this question? And it just says, actually, I don't know. I'm not sure about the answer to that one. And what would be even better is if I were grateful for that as an answer.